Colin Stagg was the prime suspect in the Rachel Nickel murder case. He was charged after an undercover policewoman enticed him to talk about his fantasies of sex and violence. A judge threw the case out before a jury was even sworn in and condemned the murder squad's tactics. Although innocent in the eyes of the law, many people still see him as guilty. On tonight's Cook Report, he takes a lie detector test.
Do you consider yourself a violent man?
No.
He faces hypnosis.
You primarily came here to find out what happened on July the 15th, 1992.
And in the ultimate test,
Hello, Colin.
he goes for the truth drug, as we examine, for the first time in public, Colin Stagg's defence.
Were you the one to first mention the cutting of human flesh to cause blood to drip onto a woman's breasts?
Yes.
She was a shining light, a bright star in my life and everybody who knew her.
My name will always be linked to the murder of Rachel Nickel, and I've got to live with that for the rest of my life.
Did you kill Rachel Nickel?
Wimbledon Common, scene of Rachel's murder, and the start of a very unusual investigation for us. It's unusual in that not only does the man at the centre of the case have a perfect right, as do we all, to be presumed innocent, but also a judge has already thrown out the case against him. We wouldn't presume to try him again today, but what we are going to do, with his cooperation and for the very first time, is to test his side of the story, a story a jury never heard.
That on the 15th of July, 1992, Wimbledon Common, you murdered Rachel Nickel, causing her death by multiple stab wounds.
These are police videotapes of Colin Stagg's interrogation. His legal team gave us complete access to his defence case. He's always protested his innocence and pointed to a lack of any forensic evidence.
I mean, there was nothing there to tie me in with any crime whatsoever.
There's no forensic evidence?
No forensic, no.
Which there wouldn't be, one would think, after 2 months. If there had been, it would have gone, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't know, they took samples off me, my body, hair, pubic hair, skin, saliva. If there was any of that on Rachel Nickel, then surely they would have, discovered it.
The young mother was found with her throat slashed. She'd been sexually assaulted.
A minute search of the scene resumed today. Officers scouring
Her son, just
Wimbledon
2 years
Common.
old, was found clutching her blood-stained body.
This is the point where Rachel Nickel was confronted. The killer, we believe, came down from the side of the hill here. On the day of the murder, we found an area of flattened grass, which we believe was a makeshift hide whilst the killer watched Rachel walk along this path. Alex, the little boy, told us that as soon as his mum had been confronted at knife point, he was picked up and thrown into some brambles. We know Rachel was confronted at this point because the T-shirt she was carrying, belonging to her son, had her footprint on it and was found here. She was then goaded at knife point back to the foot of the silver birch tree here, where the stabbing and the sexual assault took place. The killer was taking an enormous risk. The attack, we believe, would have been carried out in not less than 3 minutes. With so many people on the common and in such an exposed area, it leads us to believe that the killer's mental functioning was such that he was prepared to take any risk to achieve his aims.
2 months after Rachel's murder, police created a computer-enhanced photo fit of the suspect. They built up a psychological profile of an unemployed local man, sexually inexperienced and obsessed with pornography. The profile and the photo fit led police to the door of Colin Stagg. The 29-year-old self-confessed virgin lived on his own in a flat nearby. Police discovered he'd written to a woman through a Lonely Hearts advertisement 18 months earlier, suggesting sex on Wimbledon Common. Colin Stagg is wired to a lie detector by a leading polygraph operator. He's been tested before, but not this thoroughly. With 60 questions he refused to answer during police interrogation.
Did you ever meet Rachel Nickel?
No.
Were you charged with indecent exposure as a result of your habit of sunbathing naked on Wimbledon Common?
Yes.
Though not accepted in Britain, lie detectors are widely used by American police and are accepted by most US judges. They work by measuring minute variations in specific body areas.
Breathing, both thoracic, chest, abdominal, stomach, the pulse rate, and the galvanic skin response, the sweatiness of the palm. And those four things, some people can control their breathing from the chest, but not from the stomach, and vice versa. Nobody can control all four of those simultaneously. Did you visit Wimbledon Common that day between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. approximately?
Yes.
Colin Stagg said he went to the Common twice on the day Rachel was murdered, but wasn't there at the time of her death. We discovered his account of his first walk didn't tie in with statements from other witnesses. Leaving home before 8:30, he says he crossed Roehampton Lane, round Skio Pond, then went through an underpass at Kingston Road, past a small hill, then headed back home, arriving before 9:30, where he fell asleep watching a quiz show, either Crosswits or Lucky Ladders.
We've got the TV Times of the day. It wasn't on. It hadn't been on for a month. Lucky Ladders hadn't been on for even further. What was on the day was a children's show on BBC One, an old Tarzan film.
ITV.
It was on ITV, was it?
Yeah.
Well, on ITV, on your favourite station, on Channel 3, it was a phone-in show.
You've got to bear in mind this was 2 months after that day. So obviously, you know, nobody can remember what they were watching on telly 2 months ago, you know, at a certain time. But it was around about that time that quiz programmes were coming on.
So it fitted what you needed to say, some people might say.
Let's say what they like.
I will put to you that what in fact happened on that day is that you didn't go home and fall asleep at 9:25, but in fact you were seen entering the Common by a woman called Susan Gale on the 15th of July. No comment. This woman knows you by name. No comment.
Susan Gale was walking from Jerry's Hill towards the Putney Vale Cemetery underpass when she saw him at 9:25. He was wearing a white T-shirt and a bum bag and was heading towards the windmill. Colin Stagg remembers the meeting but insists it wasn't on the day of the murder.
Mrs. Gale says that she saw you on the windmill path at 9:25. You say at that stage you were at home drifting off to sleep in front of the telly. Who's right?
I'm right.
Why should Susan Gale tell lies?
The school supervisor told police she specifically remembered the day and the time because she had to return home to take her mother-in-law to collect her pension.
She says that she saw you that morning entering the Common at 9:25 by the Putney Vale underpass. And that she saw you and your dog fights with her dog and you raised your hand and you said, as much as to say, it's all right, I'll put him on the lead. Is she wrong about that? Is she wrong about that, Colin? No comment.
First of all, you said you didn't see her at all.
When did I say that?
Well, in statements to the police, you didn't see her at all.
Perhaps because they mentioned her by name, and at that time I didn't know her name.
I see. You then said it must have been after the murder. You sat down and thought about it when you were being held overnight and wrote 11 pages of handwritten notes saying it must have been after because you remember the police cordons, the tapes and things.
Yeah.
Then she says, no, I was not on the Common afterwards, only once, 6 weeks later, at a completely different time and a different place. And after that, you change your story again and say, well, it must have been before.
Well, I was trying to remember the day she was describing. And before I found out later that she never went on at the Common after the murder.
Well, then you had to change your story to fit the facts, didn't you?
Well, no, I'm just saying that I remember the day clearly of what she was describing, but it wasn't the day of the murder. And I was trying to remember if I ever saw her before or after the murder. So when the police told me that she never went on the Common after, so it must have been before. So
Well, it could. The answer could be. It might have been in between. It might have been the day of the murder.
it wasn't.
Well, she says it was.
And I'm saying it wasn't.
Another witness, Jane Harriman, told police she saw a man she later identified as Colin Stagg 3 times. Firstly at 10:10 near the Royal Surrey Regiment Memorial. Then 7 minutes later around the curling pond. And then at 10:23 coming out of the woods and heading back towards the memorial. She was sure he was wearing a white shirt and carrying a black bag. He says he wore a black T-shirt and has never had such a bag.
You say it can't be you because you don't possess that sort of clothing. You say I knew it couldn't be me because I've not got a shirt like that. That's nonsense. She describes your way of walking.
Let's talk about Mrs. Harriman, who identified your unusual walk, which you admit you have, and she picked you out at an ID parade. She says she saw you on the Common at 10:10, 10:17 and 10:23. In other words, 5.5 minutes walk from the time and the place of the murder.
As far as I can remember, this man, the only funny walk that he had was the very fact that he was trying to hide his face from this woman. So obviously...
Now, she describes a stooping walk, which is what you got.
Well, yeah, I've got a stooping walk, but this man, if he had something to hide, he would stoop to keep his face away from anybody watching him.
She also was the person who was responsible for giving the information for the artist's impression, leaving aside the body, but the face, which you agree looks like you.
Apart from the hairline, yeah.
So you're saying she's wrong too?
Yeah, I'm not that man.
A police helicopter circled the scene around 11:15 a.m. Colin Stagg told us the noise woke him and he decided to take a second walk on the Common. During his trip, he says he talked to 2 police officers who told him exact details of the murder, details he then mentioned to other witnesses during his walk.
You said to me that PC Crouch told you what time the events had happened. Can't possibly have done that. It was well into the afternoon, late into the afternoon, when we suddenly discovered the time that the murder had occurred. And as far as the PC on the periphery of the Common would have been concerned, it could have happened the night before. But all of a sudden, you are telling lies within an hour to an hour and a half after the offence, displaying a knowledge as to when it was safe to be on the Common and when it was safe not to admit being on the Common.
You also said to PC Couch, who was one of those cordoning off the Common, that you were there between 8:15 and 8:50.
I can't remember the times in detail, but it sounds about right.
Well, that would be a safe time to admit, wouldn't it? Because you also say that you'd learnt from PC Couch that the murder took place at around about 10:30.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, PC Couch was not in possession of that information at that stage. Neither were any of the senior officers involved until some hours later.
The police are dirty bastards, you know that. They set people up. They change their statements so they can set people up. Everybody knows that.
Do you consider yourself a violent man?
No.
Question 28 on the lie detector test said, "Are you a violent man?" And you said?
I said no.
Right. Did you stab your brother?
No, I nicked my brother.
You nicked your brother. But you stabbed him, or nicked him, with what?
An old pair of blunt secateurs.
Why did you give the police a drawing of what is plainly a knife?
That was involved in it, but I never used that. It was the secateurs I nicked him with.
And you're not a violent man?
No.
Why did you attack a cameraman? You went for him with the dog's chain wound round your fist?
By then, I'd been termed a lot of things by the press, by the media, and I was under a lot of pressure. Every time my name was mentioned, I was called a flasher, pervert, even murderer. If somebody was going to keep calling you that, you wouldn't go and greet them and give them a good sturdy handshake, would you?
There are two good examples of violence there.
I was reacting like any normal human being would.
Well, that's for others to judge, I guess. Some people, though, would say that this is another example of your continuing inconsistencies, and that there have been so many untruths, so many lies told, perhaps you don't know the difference between the truth and a lie.
I do, quite strongly.
Colin Stagg was the murder squad's prime suspect, but they didn't have enough evidence and had to let him go. Top-level clearance was then given for a sensitive undercover operation. Knowing that he'd sent a pornographic letter to a Lonely Hearts contact, police decided, on the advice of a psychological profiler, to trick him into writing to a new pen friend.
Did you enter into correspondence with a female calling herself Lizzie James, who you later discovered to be an undercover policewoman?
Yes.
Did you meet this Lizzie James on 4 occasions?
Yes.
Were you hoping to enter into a physical, sexual relationship with Lizzie James?
Yes.
Legally, Lizzie James cannot be identified.
Would you like to introduce yourself formally?
Believing Colin Stagg, if he was guilty, would only confess to somebody he could trust, the psychologist advised that she should tell him she'd taken part in a black magic killing.
Yes, I'm a serving police officer. For the purpose of this interview, I am known as Lizzie James.
Before that crucial meeting with Lizzie James, Colin Stagg prepared a graphic letter detailing violent sex using a knife on Wimbledon Common. Within minutes of Lizzie confessing her invented secret, the letter was handed over.
You're saying that after the first meeting you then introduced the knives and the blood and things like that?
Yeah.
After she told you her guilty secret at the first meeting?
Yeah.
But that's not true, Colin, is it? Because you gave her that letter which you had written in advance,
right, yeah.
As she left. So that letter had been written before
yeah.
you knew the guilty secret.
Yeah.
So what you told me wasn't true. It wasn't as a result of learning of the guilty secret because you'd written the letter in advance.
During that meeting, you had no opportunity to write that letter there. Do you remember?
No comment.
And in fact, you didn't even go to the toilet once during that meeting. Do you remember that?
No comment.
You handed me that letter, and I got into the taxi, and you walked away.
You handed that to her as she left.
Yeah.
And that was the first time these deviant ingredients had been added.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you are very definite about what you've said, and sometimes you're not. And once again, it seems that's to suit as well. People would have a great deal of difficulty in believing you because so many things are inconsistent and so many things change.
I wrote those letters. The first letter you're describing, I say it again and again. I use my head. And that's hard for people to believe that I am intelligent. You can figure people out if they give you hints.
Yeah, but that's not what you said. You said you didn't introduce any of these things until she told you her guilty secret.
No, I told you that was my confusion. I thought you were talking about another letter.
Well, how much confusion is there about the other things you've told me?
There's no confusion there.
Well, once again, some people might find that hard to believe.
Let's leave them guessing, eh?
In all, Lizzie James was sent dozens of letters, each more revolting and sexually depraved than the last, some disturbingly similar to the attack on Rachel.
Colin, if I were to show you some 30 or 40 letters that you'd exchanged with Lizzie James, would you have anything to say then? No comment. Concerning your sexual activity, in particular, your desire to have sexual intercourse and sexual practices on Wimbledon Common and in open woodland involving the use of knives, no comment. Where where blood is caused to flow.
Some of the ingredients of these fantasies, sex with a stranger, nakedness in the park, bondage, all that sort of thing, dripping blood, these things also apply, they also apply to the way poor Rachel Nickel died.
She wasn't naked as far as I was known. You know, she just had her clothes torn down, as far as I discovered.
And a lot of the things that are in your fantasies turned out to have happened to Rachel. Are you saying there's another man running around somewhere who has an identical set of fantasies to you?
They're not my fantasies, they're stories that I made up.
What stories that he made up then? Stories in... He's got the same story in his head,
well, no,
driving him as you have.
The man who done that, the difference between that man and me is that he has these fantasies, otherwise he wouldn't have done that. And he enacts out his fantasies.
So you didn't act out your fantasies or stories, but somebody else with an identical set of stories or fantasies has acted them out on Wimbledon Common.
Yeah, of course. Somebody much more dangerous than me, because he believes in his fantasies and his stories. Well, to him, they're his fantasies, but these are just stories I've just made up at the top of my head.
You told the truth, did you? You told the truth that you were at home by 9:15 at the latest on the day that Rachel was murdered. I think what happened is once you'd been seen by the Harrimans, you walked off down the windmill path, you walked over the top of the tumulus and you sat down in a little patch of grass. I think you actually described in one of your letters to Mr. Jones the fact that you see this gorgeous blonde woman approaching from the distance. Is that what happened to Rachel? You looked down from your vantage point and spied her, and you rushed down and you ambushed her, and you pushed the little boy face down. Pushed the little boy face down into the mud. Then you stabbed Rachel 49 times.
Test 4. Did you kill Rachel Nickel?
No.
After 60 questions, our tester spent 2 days analysing the recorded body signals before declaring his findings.
Colin Stagg categorically did not kill Rachel Nickel. So, with that result behind you, would you welcome a civil case brought against you by, for example, the Nickel family?
Yes, I would. If the Nickel family were convinced that I was innocent, and that would make me feel more at ease in my life, that I would like to actually meet the family and look them straight in their eyes and say, you know, I'm not your daughter's killer.
But the lie detector was only one of 3 tests we asked Colin Stagg to take. We also took him to a hypnotist used by many doctors who told us he'd resisted all attempts to induce hypnosis. And after a psychiatrist explained that the truth drug, though completely safe, was also difficult to defeat, he finally refused to take it.
I was dead against the truth drug because the very fact of having chemicals into my body, my only vice is smoking a lot.
Wouldn't it have been worth it? I mean, it's much more believable, so we are told, much more severe, much harder to cheat than either hypnosis or the lie detector.
My main concern is what would be the long-term effects.
Isn't the long-term effect, or couldn't it have been, to convince more people that you were innocent?
Well, I consider my health more important.
Yet all these other questions, Colin Stagg, remain unanswered.
I've answered them as best as I could, and I did my best.
Then it's up to the viewers to decide who to believe.
Fair enough.